Welcome to the WoW podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories and insights from our university community. Tune in for conversations about growth, success, and the power of communication in the academic world. So get ready to soar with us on the wings of wisdom.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are, and whenever you're watching or listening to the show. Welcome to the Wings of Wisdom. This is your host, Dr. Mohsin Bensed. My co-host today is the incredible Kyan McDonald. Kyan, I'm sure you're super excited for our guest today.
Super excited.
And I'm sure you have a lot of questions for him, right?
I'm sure I do.
So without further ado, please do introduce him.
Sure. As you said, my name is Kyan McDonald. Thank you everyone for being here. This is the Wings of Wisdom podcast. Today, our guest has dedicated his career to public service and the revitalization of Ashland, Ohio. From serving as a county commissioner at just 22 years old to working in state government and nonprofit leadership, he has remained committed to improving the lives of those in his community. Since becoming mayor in 2017, he has led efforts to enhance Ashland's infrastructure, attract new businesses, and foster a strong connection between the city and Ashland University. Please welcome Mayor Matt Miller to the Wings of Wisdom podcast.
Well, thank you for a wonderful introduction. That's very kind, and I'm honored to be here with you today.
Well, thank you so much. We know you're so busy, and we apologize for the technical difficulties that you had to go through this morning.
No problem. I almost think that's inevitable. It seems like every Zoom call, every Teams meeting, everyone goes through that. So no problem at all.
Right. But thank you for understanding. So let's start with your time as a student at AU. What led you to choose Ashland University for your undergraduate studies?
Well, I'll tell you what, I actually did grow up in the Ashland area. In fact, I was even born at the hospital, one of the last babies born at the hospital. And what I will tell you is I always, even as a small child, would tell my mom and dad that I wanted to go to Ashland College. At that time, it was Ashland College. And I remember my mom telling me, because both of my parents, neither of them had any higher education. I remember her telling me, that's an expensive school. I don't know if you'll be able to go there or not. But I still, every time we drove past the campus, I would always look at those buildings and think I'm going to go to college there one day. Well, as I got older and as I developed more and more of an interest in American government and politics, the truth is the other school that I was interested in was Georgetown University. I loved everything about it, not the least of which was the location, but certainly the opportunities that it gave you being so near our nation's capital. And if I'm really superficial, I will tell you I also just love the campus. I love the brick streets. I love that whole Ivy League look that you had there on the Georgetown University campus. But I will tell you, when it came time to make a decision on which school to attend, I looked at both intently. And what I discovered was it was going to cost me a whole lot more money to go to Georgetown University than it would our very own Ashland University. And at that time, of course, the Ashbrook Center was really just getting a bright start. And one of my English teachers at Hillsdale High School one day brought me to the Ashbrook Center to meet with the director. At that time, it was Charlie Parton. Charlie Parton was a guy that wore cowboy boots and owned a bunch of Burger Kings. And he was quite a personality. And he spent about an hour with me talking about my interest in American history and government and so on. And I remember what he did. He actually went to the shelf, got a book, set it in front of me, and he said, "Here, go home and read this summer and check back in afterwards." Well, the book was Machiavelli's The Prince. And I will confess to you that I had never read a book like that before. Quite candidly, I would have rather flipped through the news magazines and read current events than I ever would have wanted to read such a book. But I did understand it, and quite honestly, in some ways, probably even found it offensive, because more or less it boiled down to the ends justify the means. And I don't know that I agree with that philosophy. But I came back at the end of the summer, met with Charlie Parton, told him my take on the book, and actually I said just that to him. He said, "So what did you learn?" And I said, "Well, the book says the ends justify the means." And he just laughed and threw his head back and he says, "You're right." He said, "If you want to come as a scholar, you're welcome to." Well, at that time, the Ashbrook Scholar Program consisted of 10 students per grade. So there were 10 freshmen, there were 10 sophomore, 10 junior, and so on, for almost 40 or 50 students total. And so it was very exclusive. And when they would bring, the Ashbrook Center would host these dignitaries. For example, the first one I met was Margaret Thatcher. And then from there, eventually was Benjamin Netanyahu, Dan Quayle, the vice president, Clarence Thomas. Of course, we could go through the list. But the reality is, because the Ashbrook Center was here at Ashland University, Georgetown and Ashland University, while some might say there was no comparison, in my mind, well, if I can stay here in Ashland and I can meet these world dignitaries and these leaders that I look up to right here in my own backyard for not even a fraction of the cost, Ashland made a whole lot of sense to me. And
Wow.
I do believe that it was the right decision. I really do, even to this day.
Very good. What about you, Kyan?
I mean, yeah, I was looking at Case Western and Ashland when I was looking at schools. But I mean, I have the advantage of my parents working here. So for me, Ashland is even more financially no-brainer.
Yes.
So, and with the Ashbrook Center, it really is just a no-brainer. There's so many benefits to being a part of an organization like that most colleges around here do not have for the kind of field I want to get into.
That's a wonderful story, Mayor Miller. You know, to get to that decision and that comparison. What a wonderful take. I'm assuming that you studied political science.
You know what? My major was actually public communications with a minor in public affairs, sports communications, and marketing. And I will tell you that I would tell everyone, I don't want to be a politician. I want to be a public servant. And so in my mind, somehow I define that as I need these other skills. And sure, we'll study American history and we'll read all these big, thick books you want us to read. But right now, I'm more interested in what's going on in American government now. And in fact, I used to get into some pretty heated discussions with some of the Ashbrook leaders, because I would tell them, you know, Farmer John does not care how many books I've read. He does not care who my favorite political philosopher is. He wants the pothole fixed on his road. And so that's my job. Well, now that was somewhat of an immature way of looking at it. And I will tell you, as time has gone by, after graduating from Ashland University and being involved in government, then you do begin to see the importance of understanding our founding documents, understanding the mindset and the philosophy and the reasoning behind our form of government and why things were set up the way they were set up in the beginning. So all those long books and long essays that you read of the founding fathers, it is valuable because it gives you a foundation that allows you then to serve the public with our guiding principles in mind.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's the theoretical foundation that gives us that strength and insight into all the little decisions that we make. But
yes,
they're the back end of the founding documents. I think that's incredibly important. And by the way, Kyan is also an Ashbrook Scholar.
Yes, I know. Very impressive.
You were very involved in student leadership and the Ashbrook program, of course. So how did those experiences influence your path toward public service and politics?
Well, the truth is I was someone that scheduled all my classes early in the morning and tried to have them all complete by noon or 1 p.m. And there were a couple of night classes, I think, a few evenings a week. But nonetheless, I did that so that I could go out and work a real job here in our community. And at that time, I was blessed to work for a man by the name of Harry R. Gill II. Now, if you're on the campus of Ashland University, you will see located there on College Avenue, right next to the Business College, a beautiful white office building that once was a home, and that is named the Gill Center. Well, Mr. Gill is the one who presented that home. It was one of his family homes to the university. He actually at one point served as the chairman of the board of Ashland University. Well, I was his lawn boy and I was his pool boy and I was the guy who drove him back and forth to the airport and did everything from address his Christmas cards to help his wife bake coffee cakes in the kitchen. I was there every day except for Sundays. And when they went out west and stayed at their home in Palm Springs, I actually house sat for them. Well, I will tell you that Mr. Gill was unlike anyone in my life because I grew up in a very blue collar setting. And so to have a corporate executive who was extremely successful at that time, someone who took great value or placed great value on education, formal education, and so on, he was definitely a role model. There is no question. And what I will tell you is he helped lift my focus to a higher level. There's no question. And his wife, who was from England, who I still to this day think of Ashland's own little Queen Elizabeth, she was just as prim and proper, dressed in the same types of suits and everything. She definitely helped polish those soft skills of mine. And so I guess where I'm going with all this, they were very supportive, of course, of my time at Ashland University, meaning every activity that I wanted to be involved, they were right there to cheer us on and so on. So I did end up joining the Student Senate. In fact, Kyan will appreciate this because I believe he's on the Student Senate, and I know he's run for office, for a variety of offices. I actually believe I ran for president of my freshman class, president of the sophomore class. My junior year ran for student body vice president, and then my final year senior class president. And so I was very involved in student government and loved every bit of it. And you know, there's still at least one person of one of those folks that were on Student Senate that I still am in touch with today. And she actually went on to work in Capitol Hill for most of her career, but recently became an assistant to Governor Youngkin in Virginia. So those experiences, they all help shape who you are and how you approach positions such as this, mayor, county commissioner, or even in local government today.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. And by the way, the building is beautiful. The Gill, yeah, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So you ran, here's another thing. This is very impressive. You ran for county commissioner at just 18 and won 18 years old and won at 22, right?
Yes.
That's not something that so many young people take on. So what motivated you to pursue public office at such a young age?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you, when you say that and you state the ages, I think, wow, I was crazy. I absolutely was crazy. And God bless the voters that they had confidence in me when I had so little experience doing anything. So, but what I will tell you is when I was a junior in high school, when I first met the folks at the Ashbrook Center, I had too many study halls. I had went through all the courses that were available at the high school and was doing the post-secondary enrollment option at Ashland University, actually taking political science classes. I think I took 4 of them. So by the time I actually graduated from high school, had pretty much been able to complete almost 1 year of courses to count toward my 4-year college degree. But because I had too many study halls, one day a teacher said to me, a biology teacher of all teachers, said, listen, we're going to find something for you to do during these study halls. So here's what I'm going to do. I know you're interested in politics. I know one of the county commissioners. Each week, we want you to drive to the county commissioner meetings, sit in on the meetings, take notes. At the end of the week, write a report or kind of a journal entry about what you witnessed. Okay, so I did it. I was always the only one in those meetings. And quite honestly, there were 3 county commissioners, still are, but at that time, they were all probably more than 50 years older than I was. And every meeting, and I can't always say that it was exciting stuff they were discussing, of course, in county government, but I would listen. And I'm not trying to be corny when I say this, but the more I was there, the more I began to think, you know what? If I was in that role, I would have done it different. Or I might have done a little bit more homework than I think this person did, and so on. And so when I graduated from high school at age 18, I actually decided I was going to run for county commissioner. And at that time, I had it in my mind that I will run for county commissioner. And if I win, then I will just get my college degree at night. I'll just take nice night classes and still be able to do both. Now, today I look back and I think, praise the Lord that I did not win that election, because it would have been so hard. to take those night classes or to complete the college degree. And quite honestly, who knows? I might not have ever got my college degree because I would have been so distracted with the politics and what I wanted to do in the county. So that all worked out perfectly, even though it wasn't what I had originally intended. But I ran. I ran at age 18. That was the only requirement, that you live in the county, you be a registered voter, and age 18. I ran on the Republican ticket. All three of the county commissioners at that time were Republicans, so I was challenging them in a primary, which many who know politics know that's not usually the popular thing to do. I asked several of my teachers if they would contribute to my campaigns, and I actually ended up, I think, raising about $900. I printed up my own flyers on the copy machine and my old cheap yard signs stapled to a wooden stake and started going door to door. And on election night, after spending my $900 campaign fund and going to every place I could think of, I will tell you that I did not win, but out of 3,000 votes, or let me think here, I can't remember, but whatever it was, I ended up losing by 350 votes. I remember calling my mom from the Board of Elections, who incidentally wasn't registered to vote yet. I called her and told her that I had just lost. And she said, well, you don't sound like you lost. You sound like you won. And I said, well, I'm just so glad I didn't get an embarrassing number of votes. So as fate would have it, we went off to Ashland University. 4 years later, in 1999, I decided upon graduation, I was going to run again. And I was going to run against the same guy now 4 years later. And this time, I knew I'd have to raise more money. In fact, I remember, Kyan, I'm giving you all my strategies. So I remember sitting at my kitchen table, actually Mr. Gill's kitchen table, because I was house sitting at that time, and I made a long list of all the people I could ask for money for my campaign. Some I knew, some I didn't know, some I just knew had money. And so I started calling one by one. And by the time it was done, I ended up raising, I believe, over $13,000. And now I really had a campaign war chest. That doesn't sound much today. And in fact, it would take a lot more if you had a competitive race today here in Ashland. Right. But at that time, no one had ever spent $13,000 on a county commissioner race in Ashland. And still stayed busy, met everyone, of course, had the money to run a full-fledged campaign. And 4 years after losing by 350 votes, ended up on election night winning by over 3,000 votes, and became at that point the youngest county commissioner in the state of Ohio at age 22. I think I was elected at 21, I believe. I'm not sure now. I lost track. It's a lot of times going by. But I will tell you, I was the county commissioner, and I will tell you the truth. Of course, I was excited, and I did know what was going on in the county and so on. But I'm going to be honest with you. When I walked into that office that first day, and incidentally, let me just throw this in, because every now and then there is the right time for a change. When I walked into that office that day, and you think about it, that was 2000. It's 25 years ago now, but that's still a pretty modern number, 2000. Yeah. When we walked in, there was only one county commissioner who had an email address. She was the only one on email. And when they showed me my office, there was no computer, there was no word processor, there was an electric typewriter sitting right there in the middle of the desk in front of the chair. So it probably was time for a change. Now, I'll just close by saying this, though. For those first couple of years, I'd go to those commissioner meetings, and I was scared to death to speak up because I did not want to say something foolish. Here I was sitting next to commissioners that are more than a half a century older than me. They've been in the job for multiple terms, and here I am, the kid that just got elected. And it took probably about 2 years before I was willing to speak up in a significant way, before I thought I had enough knowledge, if you will, to participate. But it's interesting because years later I read that somewhere in some text I read that Abraham Lincoln was asked by a soldier or someone who had just taken a position or particular job, and he's saying he wanted out. It was no good. He'd only been in it a few months. And Abraham Lincoln's advice to him was, you've got to be in a job for more than 2 years before you know whether or not it's where you're supposed to be or it's what you want to do. Now, I'm sure someone could come up with an example of why that's not always true, but you know what? Truthfully, in my life, it has, for every job I've had, it's probably taken about 2 years before you felt comfortable enough to really contribute. Yeah. So anyhow, that was a long answer.
No, that's a wonderful answer. Yeah. I'm just amazed at how much you remember You know,
Well,
freshman year, sophomore year,
yes,
all of
yes.
that.
Well, he's probably had to retell his story about 100 times.
Well, and I will tell you, I was one of these guys, quite candidly, that by the time I was 16, I had everything planned out. I had literally
Yeah.
could produce for you today the yellow legal pad that I spent one day all by myself in private, going down and line by line writing at age 16, I will do this. At age 17, I'll do this, 18, and so on. And ironically, that list, when I was 16, I made that list up to age 25. And
Mhm.
if I'm to be transparent, just about everything on that list came to pass as I thought I wanted it to, until probably around 24 or 25. Then things weren't unfolding the way I thought they would. And I know am someone that does believe God is there and he pays attention to every detail of our lives. And you always want to ask him for guidance because he does know what's best. But in my immaturity at that time, I'll admit I probably spent, even though I did pray and ask him to show me where I should go, what I should do, what I should be, and so on, maybe didn't take it as serious as I do today. And when the train started going off the tracks there in my mid 20s, that is when I finally said, okay, God, my life is yours. You are the one who made me. You know where I belong. You know what it is you want to use me to accomplish, Lord. No one knows better what I am qualified to do, nor where I will find the most pleasure and satisfaction than you. I'm going to choose
Absolutely.
to believe you know. And that was the first time that I actually got down on my knees and said, God, I surrender. If you want my car, take it. If you want the house, take it. If you don't want me to be in politics, I'll quit, whatever you want. And that is a prayer that I was always scared to death to pray because I
Mm.
felt that if I pray that prayer, you know what he's going to do? He's going to take me to the jungles of Africa and I'll have to be a missionary. And I like hotels with marble floors and chandeliers. And it may sound silly, but that is an honest fear. And I'd always heard pastors say, or leaders on some of the college Christian groups talk about the fact, is God in the driver's seat or is he in the passenger seat? And I would hear those and I would take them serious. And I would think to myself, well, I know he's in the car. And I'm sure that he's right here with me because I've talked to him and prayed to him and I see the answers. But Lord, I don't know about this idea of you getting behind the wheel and you taking over. And here's what I will tell you now. Here we are, 23 years later. I'm 48 right now. I will say that the truth is, I say with 100% certainty, he knows what is best. I will tell you that there's a good chance that his plan will not look like yours or mine would if we were custom designing our futures. But I think what you will see is that his plan was perfect, is perfect, because he's the only one that knows your motives and knows what really makes you tick and where you'll find ultimate satisfaction. Appreciate you
Absolutely.
listening
Yeah.
to that
This
answer.
this beautiful. This is beautiful. Well said. I cannot top that.
Well,
And I also appreciate your I guess both of your deep connection to the area. That's something that I don't really have. I first came to Ashland in 2010, so it's been some time, but
yes.
not really someone who who knows the area inside out, like the two of you, right, Kyan? You were
Yeah.
raised here.
Yes.
So you also spent time working with the Salvation Army's Kroc Center and later
Yes.
the Ohio Department of Transportation, right?
Yes.
What could you
Yeah.
tell us about those roles and what they taught you about leadership and public service? And maybe also if you could reflect on how your time at AU and the Ashbrook Center kind of prepared you for that.
Absolutely. Well, there's a number of directions I can go on this. So the first thing that I will say to you is this is a perfect question to follow my last answer, because I can assure you that working at the Salvation Army or working at the Ohio Department of Transportation was never part of my plan. You would have never have found those two items on the list. And yet they are some of the most formative and probably the best experiences that I've had in my professional career. So let's start with well, first of all, let me say I ran for county commissioner 3 times. First time you heard I lost, but the second time won. When it was time, when it was time to, run for reelection, no one ran against me, so I was successfully elected for a second term. And it just so happened that during that second term, I had been involved in the local committee that had put together a grant application. And when I say grant application, I'm talking an application that was literally that big. It was huge.
Wow.
To basically try to get a grant from the Ray and Joan Kroc Foundation to build a state-of-the-art arts, education, and recreation center here in our community. We were competing with places all across the country: San Francisco, Philadelphia, Boston, Atlanta, Staten Island, New York. You can see that that's not exactly a category that we're usually in as Ashland, Ohio, but we competed for it. A local group of us hired a consultant and we went after it. Well, we ended up getting the grant, $12 million to build the Kroc Center that we all know now as the place with the indoor soccer field and basketball courts and art studios and classrooms and indoor water park.
Right.
And we got $12 million to build it and $12 million to endow it. And at that time, just as I was wrapping up that second term as commissioner, one of the local Salvation Army majors reached out to me after I spoke to a group at United Way and said, "Listen, Matt, would you ever consider coming to work for the Salvation Army? We're just getting ready to build this facility. We haven't really hired any staff. And we're wondering if you'd be willing to help because you know the community and the community knows you. And this is going to take a lot of community building to get support behind this." And I ended up agreeing to come to work for the Salvation Army. And I want you to know that Salvation Army is a wonderful organization worldwide. It is quite a group of men and women who are truly dedicated to their faith in Jesus, but to taking care of those in need in our communities. So I did that, Business and Human Resource Administrator. Learned a lot there. It was a good respite from politics because it was very different, but it also exposed me to a whole group of people that I wouldn't have encountered as a county commissioner at a chamber function, men and women who are coming in at noontime for a warm meal and then looking for how they are going to survive through the winter. And so it was wonderful to be there, learned a lot about people and about challenges that our community faces and other communities face. But now let's talk about your question about the Ashbrook Center and how it prepared me for those endeavors. When I was at Ashland University, I needed an internship that paid. So I got an internship at the Ohio Department of Transportation. I had that internship, I believe, for probably 4 semesters before I graduated, and it was in their communications section under the Public Information Office. And I will tell you that one of my favorite jobs there was I would push the mail cart around the building in the morning and deliver all the mail to everyone. They had several hundred employees. So I got to see everyone, kind of like a paid social activity. Well, here's a lesson for anyone who is listening who might be a young person who's doing an internship that they're not really they're kind of wondering, how will this play into everything? So for those 2 years that I was at ODOT, yes, I did a good job. And they noticed me. And in fact, when I went to graduate, they actually offered me a job in their communications office, but I wanted to run for county commissioner, so I passed it. But what I will tell you is that would have been in 1999 and 2000. Think about this. In 2011, so more than a decade after that, John Kasich is elected governor of the state of Ohio. And obviously, he's putting together his cabinet and a new director of the Department of Transportation. And there's a lot of jockeying going on within that organization, which at that time had probably about 7,000 employees across the state. Well, I'm going to say a term that I've already said several times. As fate would have it, I get a call from a guy who was an engineer, a civil engineer at ODOT, who, if I'm honest with you today, and I hope he doesn't watch this, when he called, I truly did not remember him. I did not know who he was. I maybe thought I had heard his name before, but I don't know if that was really true or I was imagining it. But he called me and he said, "Listen, we are putting together the leadership team at ODOT. And I remember when you were at ODOT, everyone liked you so much. You were always so positive. And he said, we've got a lot of morale issues right now at this organization. And I just think you'd be perfect to be here right now. Now, what a compliment, first of all. Number one, that he remembered me, but number two, that he had such a positive impression during that time. He said, I'm wondering if you will come and interview, just talk to the leadership team about being the deputy director of business and human resources.
Wow.
Well, I did go have that interview, and there were a lot of people that had a much richer background than I did. And yet I was selected to be the district deputy director of the Ohio Department of Transportation, Business and Human Resources. And I will tell you, during that next 7 years, I think I was in that position. Yes, 7 years, I learned so much about how to manage a huge agency, because
Wow.
it's no small task to turn an organization
Absolutely,
of 7,000 people, make transformational change in a government bureaucracy where politics runs amok. And I got to learn it from Jerry Ray. Now, Jerry Ray, that name won't mean much to you, but if you mention that in state government right now, there's a lot of people that say he was a wonderful man. He is the only guy that has ever been appointed to the role of the director of Department of Transportation under two governors. George Voinovich had him during his time for 8 years. He retired, but then Kasich brought him back because he was so effective the first time. Learned so much about leadership style and, just quite honestly, how to bring change in a major organization. And like I say, that was never part of my plan. But it seems as though God knew what's best. If you're going to be effective in the roles I have for you, Matt, you need to go here, and you're going to learn from these guys so that when you get the opportunity to be mayor of your city, or you get the opportunity to do thus and so, you'll be ready.
That's incredible.
Okay, sweet. I have a question. Well, I have a couple questions, but the first one is, just in your time being mayor, what do you think is your biggest accomplishment? Not just that's like the first little bit, but maybe the second part is, what are you most looking forward to? Like, do you have any big things in the works that you're pushing towards? Like, are we gonna get a new restaurant in town or something? Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll always get new restaurants. Well, let me tell you, first of all, when people ask me that question, what do I think is the best accomplishment? Here's what I'm going to say. And I don't believe that I did this on my own, but I do think I might have played a role. And that is a change in the spirit here in this community. We went through decades of everyone always whining and moaning about what Ashland used to be and how we're so different now in a bad way. We've gone downhill. We used to be this, we used to be that. Then you would always hear the comments. Even when I was running, I would always hear, why can't we be more like this city? Why can't we be more like that city? And then I would always hear people say, well, it is only Ashland. It's just old Ashland and all this. And the thing that has changed that I would say I think is probably best for all of us is the fact that now our attitude has changed. Who we see ourselves to be and what we think we can be in the future is totally different. It's been a long time since I've heard someone say, well, it is only Ashland. Instead, what I hear people say now is, well, it is Ashland. And you know what? You got to come and see our city. I'm so proud to call Ashland home, and so on. So it's that change of attitude that is probably the best thing that has happened during my time as mayor. And let's face it, when you've got the right attitude and you've got the right spirit, you start making better decisions that ultimately do bring about a better reality. When you're talking positive and thinking positive about your future, then you start making better decisions. And today we are in a wonderful place here in Ashland, and the spirits are high and people are excited about what lies ahead. And Kyan, today as I sit before you, there are multiple restaurants, chain restaurants, that are looking at Ashland, trying to figure out the right locations, because every chain has its own specs that they want you to meet, where you have an entrance here and an exit on this side, and we'll only exit out on a major highway and all this. So it can be a challenge, but there are more things coming. And I would say right now, the thing that I'm looking forward to the most is the creation of the Pump House District. For those that don't know, the Pump House District is an area where there used to be a big Myers manufacturing facility. Myers was at one time one of the largest manufacturers of these old pumps that you see on farms, where they would basically pump water out of the ground to feed the animals and livestock and water everything. And they were manufactured here in Ashland. In fact, everywhere you go in Ashland, there's some sort of amenity or monument in reference to the family that used to own and operate Myers Manufacturing. Well, that site over the years became one of our biggest eyesores. Eventually, it was vacated, the company was sold, and yet the old giant industrial complex continued to crumble right before our eyes. Mm-hmm. One of these giant brick buildings, 5 stories high. Over the years, some had tried to demolish it, but ran out of money, so it was just a giant heap of rubble in the literal center of our city. Well, we cleaned it up right away. We got the grant money and the contractors in place. It's clean, it's pristine, but now it's time to redevelop it. It's 2 blocks north of our main street in downtown, a vibrant main street. And basically, when the pump house district is complete, it will feature a Hilton hotel with 90 plus bedrooms. It'll be built around the history of the property. So in other words, it won't be like every other Hilton that you might visit. Next to it will be probably 7 buildings. And these 7 buildings will range from 3 stories high to maybe 2 stories high in some places, but they will accommodate more than 200 market rate apartments. So those are fairly modern. I was going to say fancy. I don't know if that's the right word, but very modern and contemporary looks. And all of that will be just 2 blocks from downtown. The reason I think that project is so exciting is that definitely is a transformational project. When you have 500 to 1,000 people living that close to Main Street, right downtown where the restaurants and boutiques and bars are, and you've got a hotel that can accommodate guests in more than 90 rooms, let's face it, that generates a whole customer base for all of our downtown establishments. And to go back to Kyan's very important question, one that I get asked all the time, that builds in a customer base for future restaurants to develop on our main street. So that's an exciting project.
Yeah, those are all.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's lived in Ashland, there's definitely been a huge change. I mean, even just from the restoration of downtown, which was, I mean, that was your project. I mean, downtown when I was a kid, there was nothing there. I mean, most places were closed, or there was a couple places open, but no one really went there. And it's funny because even when you first started implementing things that I remember when I was in middle school and high school, like when you'd start implementing the Christmas parades or some people would be like, oh, this is kind of cheesy, this is kind of catchy, but over the years, it's like, that's Ashland,
Yes, it is.
And it's really built to become a tradition that, everyone in the town shows up for. I mean, everyone says nowadays, it's like you're in a Hallmark movie. Even the college students from different towns, they love it because that's Ashland now. And it does really fit our image as the world headquarters of friendly people, because you have events like this that sets us apart from other cities. So I've definitely seen it. Yeah.
People ask me, what's our economic development strategy? And what I've told them all along, ever since I was first elected, we are on a mission to become the most livable city possible. Now, it would always get a chuckle, but I'd say we're going to become as much like a Hallmark movie as we possibly can. Because you know what? There's a reason why people love those movies. Because it's the perfect world. It's safe. It's peaceful. Now, I know we're not perfect, and I know we have challenges just like every other corner of the globe. But the reality is we've got all the resources necessary to build the place in which we want to live. And you know what? If we become the perfect place to live, we won't have to worry about the next company coming to town, because let's face it, behind every corporate expansion or new business, there are people, and those people will follow that business, and they're only going to want their business to be in a place where they would want to live themselves. The executive and the owner of those companies, they want to locate their business where they want to be. And so when Ashland is clean, affordable, and fun, we have all those events to look forward to. You referenced the Christmas celebration. Kai, and you may not even realize this, but we have started buying the data that tracks cell phones so that we can tell how many people roughly are at these events. This past year at our Christmas parade or Christmas tree lighting, keep in mind we're a city that's probably around 20 to 25,000 people. Mm-hmm. We had over 22,000 cell phones there surrounding our town Christmas tree. And
Wow.
if you think that not everyone there would have had a cell phone and not every child there would have had a cell phone, that's pretty incredible to go
Yeah.
from what Kyan described as less than a decade ago, a place where no one even went downtown, to today, where we've got not only all of our people going downtown, but we've got all the neighbors people coming as well,
Right.
neighbors coming to join us as well. So, and just as a little FYI, all of those events, whether it be the Christmas parade and the Christmas tree lighting, or we're now just about ready to dye our town creek green for St. Patrick's Day, all of those events were aimed and are aimed at just what you describe, making it that perfect place to live, that Hallmark movie type setting. And the thing that I love is the little kids that are growing up here, this is absolutely their memories of Ashland. Those little
Right.
children will soon be adults. And you know what they're going to think of? Even if they go off to college in wonderful, marvelous big cities, they're going to always remember, back home, we used to always go downtown at Christmas time and everyone was there and it was so fun. And we used to dye the creek green and it was crazy. The mayor would be in his green pants. Those are memories that young people will not forget. And I'm convinced that ultimately they will be the memories that draw those folks back home once they've pursued their own ambitions and dreams and gotten married and are having children of their own. They're going to want to go back home to where it's safe, clean, affordable, and fun.
Absolutely. Mayor Miller, you mentioned something really interesting, the change in spirit,
Yes.
right? As one of your greatest achievements. And to me, that's more of a result of a mixture of passion, care, work ethic, and philosophy of doing. So most of the time, I think when it comes to especially like public service or politics or what have you, you have, great plans, or big hopes or wishes. But
Yeah.
I think when it comes to your approach and your philosophy, you walk the talk, and it's more like action-oriented leadership, right? So progress gets measured by what gets done and not what is promised or planned or hoped for. I just wanted to say that. So
Well,
thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I will tell you, I believe everything I say. So as much as corny and silly as it may sound, I believe every word of it. And
it is. It's very apparent, like your look, your words, and we can see that you really mean every single word that you say. It's not just for show. So, yeah. We appreciate you being our mayor.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you playing such a vital role here in the community as Ashland University's faculty and staff and students, because you are still one of our biggest, assets, because so many folks still come to Ashland because of Ashland University. And in recent years, as we've seen more people actually moving here and relocating here, when I'll ask them, so why did you come to Ashland? Almost inevitably, one of the things that they say is because we wanted a small university town. And so Ashland University and all of you contribute to our success.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is a close relationship. So the city needs the college needs the city for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Kyan, I'm sure you have some questions about communication.
About communication? Sure. I suppose the biggest question about communication would be, what do you think for college students that are maybe looking to go into a career or, a hobby that involves public speaking? What do you think is the best advice that you'd give them when approaching maybe a public talk or having to,
Yes.
address a board or something like that?
Yes. Well, let me tell you, number one, believe what you say and say what you believe. If that is the case, you will come across in a more powerful way than anyone else who might just be reading an empty script. Don't try to come up with flowery words. Come up with the words that come straight from your heart, because people can sense sincerity. And as I look back now and I think about running when I was so young, I really did want to do all the wonderful things I was telling people I wanted to do. And I think they probably sense that this kid believes what he's saying. He actually does believe that he can do this. And so they were willing to support that. So the first thing is be sincere, believe in what you're going to say and say what you believe. For me personally, and this will just be a little fun fact, when I was growing up in high school, I would always write out every speech word for word. And then I would say it over and over and over again until I more or less had it committed to memory. Then, inevitably, when I would get up and I would share that speech, I would be on a roll, but then at some point I would lose my spot in my mind, and then it was a catastrophe. Because once I had gotten off my script, it was like, oh, brother. Well, at some point, I decided, you know what? If you're going to be in the public realm, you've got to be able to speak. And so what I started doing, and believe me, it was terrifying, started before I had a presentation. I would go over in my mind what I wanted to say, what I wanted to communicate. And then I think in the beginning, I took maybe a few notes, but it wasn't long before I just cast the notes aside. But there's nothing wrong with notes. Notes are still good. And today I still use notes, but I will tell you, I just started speaking from, okay, I know what I want to communicate. I know what I want to say. I'm going to get up here and say it. And you know what? That for me allowed it to come across and be so much more natural, because I wasn't married to a particular word that I used in my written out speech, or I wasn't married to a particular text, but instead, I guess if I was married to something, it would be the meaning that I wanted to convey. And so then there was none of this, well, if I get off script, I'll never figure out where I lost my script and get back on it. I could just talk. And I will say this, the other part of it is the more you do it, the easier it does get and the more confident you get. Right. When I was in junior high, and believe me, I was not a kid who read books. I might have had it in my heart to read a book, but I'd buy the book and then never read it. But there was one book that I read. It was called The Magic of Thinking Big. And I've read that book multiple times. In fact, I still use sections of it for our senior staff meetings here. But one of the things it said in that book was, whenever you're given to the chance to speak, always say something that matters. Whether it's in a boardroom, whether it's in front of a crowd, always make sure that what you say matters. Number two, it also said, action cures fear and builds confidence. Let me tell you, even today, the most terrifying part about giving a speech, because I do get nervous. In fact, I just recently gave one and my hand was shaking while I was making gestures. I could see it. My wife said she didn't see it, but I could see it. And I will tell you that the saying, action cures fear and builds confidence, the most terrifying part for me, and I think for many, is those moments of anticipation right before you actually do get up there before the microphone or the podium or before the crowd and deliver the speech. Action cures fear and builds confidence. It's those moments of waiting that's where all the anxiety and stress peak. But once you just finally take action, then it usually calms everything down and you are able to deliver your message. So I guess that'll be my words of advice as we part. Action cures fear and builds confidence. It's the stress and worry of what might go wrong that never goes wrong that keeps people from actually being successful communicators.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And we appreciate your honesty. There's a lot of honesty there. I wouldn't have guessed that you felt nervous ever, honestly.
Well, that's wonderful. Let me tell you, and the truth is, you've already heard about my faith. I pray all the time, God, please give me the words to speak. Lord, please give me the words to speak. You know what will connect with people. Please give me the words to speak. And if I'm honest, Kyan, if you ever see me in the restroom right before a big presentation and you see some guy down on his knees, you'll know it's probably me, because usually what I do right before I'm supposed to speak, I run into the restroom real quick, as long as no one's in there, and quickly get down on my knees. God, please give me the words to speak. And fortunately, he seems to deliver.
That's wonderful. Well, let's finish. Usually we finish with a piece of advice for our students. If you were to give, I know you mentioned that beautiful piece of advice for communication. Yes. But this is more like general for our students. What would you say to our students if there's one thing that you'd like to leave them with today?
So here's what I'm going to tell you. You are young. Chances are you've got a long and marvelous future ahead of you. But even with that being said, you've got a finite amount of time. And the problem is none of us know how much. So with that in mind, I would challenge you, even if you're not a religious person or you're not a faithful person, I would challenge you to close the door and say, God, if you are up there, will you please show me what you want me to do in this life? God, I know that you made me and you knit me together in my mother's womb. I know that you know me better than anyone else on this earth. So, Lord, I'm going to trust that you will lead me to where I need to be. And somehow he will make known, whether it's through closed doors or open doors, he will lead you right where you need to be. And I promise you, you will never be disappointed that you pursued the path he laid out for you. I can also tell you, there's a good chance that if you rebel against where he's leading you, might be a little bit of misery involved. In fact, I will tell you that the things that have caused me the most stress and anxiety and worry and frustration and anger and bitterness in my life are those things that I thought I wanted with all my heart, poured my whole life into it, and they led to nothing but suffering and agony. And yet, as I sit here with you guys this morning, and I'll close with this, the best things that have happened to me in this life are things that I never plotted or planned or schemed or tried to get, but instead were just part of his plan and trusting him. So hopefully that helps. Make the most of your life because you only get one to live.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Mayor Miller. Kyan, thank you so much for being the co-host today. And a big thank you to our guest, Mayor Matt Miller, for sharing his time, wisdom, and experiences.
Well, thank you so much for having me. You both are very, very pleasant to talk with today.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time on Wings of Wisdom.
Thank you for tuning in to the WoW podcast, where curiosity meets inspiration. Brought to you by the Writing and Communication Center at Ashland University.